My name is Damian. Most of you know me. Damian Harris-Hernandez. Um, I'm the founder and director of the Refugee Translation Project, which is a nonprofit that offers free translation support to refugees seeking asylum and other immigration relief. But first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here on this Sunday evening. Um, yeah, it's really nice to see you. And so yeah, this event is about it's an end of the year event. 2020 has been an incredibly difficult year for a lot of us, especially so for refugees. Um, closed borders and shuttered immigration courts due to either the pandemic or policy have greatly impacted the immigration process. Um, the Trump administration, lowered the refugee ceiling to 15,000 um, people, which is really low historically. Um, but hopefully, with the new administration, they've pledged to raise it to 125,000, which is a significant jump from 15,000, but it's still not, I don't think, sufficient. Hammadi is going to talk probably more about um, that aspect. But what's happened is there's been a backlog of 1.2 million cases, asylum cases here. So there's a lot to work through. Um, and you know, as borders start opening up, and with the changing administration, we are going to see an increase in demand for translated documents. And these translated documents are, essential for applicants, asylum applicants, resettlement applicants, to tell their story, to convey their story to the courts, and even to their own lawyers as well, so they can form a case to defend themselves and hopefully obtain asylum. And so these documents that we translate they can be anything from medical documents, legal documents, um, as well as their personal statement, like what happened to them in their country and why they need this immigration relief. And then, yeah, so the more documents and the more like evidence that they can present to the courts, the better their chance of staying here or winning asylum. And there's a lot of pro bono legal support for refugees, at least more so than there is translation support. And so the Refugee Translation Project is trying to fill this void of the support, so refugees do not have to pay for their translations. And some organizations will pay for the translations, but others are not supported, and they need this relief because translated documents are not that cheap. They take a lot of labor and expertise. So yeah, during 2020, we saw like a drop off in asylum cases coming through us, and so with the time that we had, we use it to build out our organization, to strengthen our organization in preparation for when more cases are going to come through and more people need translation support. So yeah, like we have our fundraising efforts now are going to building a reserve fund to pay our translators, some of whom are refugees, and also to support our organization so that we'll be able to handle all these cases coming through. We've also, since we began, have expanded our language capabilities. We used to just do Turkish and Arabic, and then we added French, and now we've added quite a few others, including Dari, Kurdish, Pashto, Spanish, Swedish, and Urdu as well, and German. And we just, when there's a need, for a language, we seek out these translators and start working with them and form a relationship that and going forward. And that way we have consistency in the work we do. Also, part of our plan is to expand the number of organizations that we work with, other immigration relief providers, such as law firms, nonprofits, so that we can work together to meet all the translation needs. Today we have two of our advisory board members. That's another thing we've started doing, is compiling a board of advisors so that we can learn from their expertise and just have like a group of people who can really guide us in best practices moving forward, which is very exciting. Also, we became an officially fiscal sponsored organization recently, and through Angels for Angels. And that's part of our strengthening our organization, getting, preparing ourselves to becoming our own independent 501c3 nonprofit. So that was a big step that we took. And yeah, today we're going to talk about what we can expect in 2021 and how the Refugee Translation Project can help the refugee situation. And we have two of our advisory board members here to talk about about the situation and how we fit into that. The first person to talk is going to be Jessica Rofé. She's a immigrant defense attorney. She works at the NYU School of Law. She teaches there and guides students in defending immigrants. So let's move on to Jessica, see what she has to say.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and really grateful that all of you took time out of your Sundays to have this conversation with us. And I'm honored to be on the advisory board for the Refugee Translation Project. As Damian mentioned, my name is Jessica Rofé. I'm the Tony Rembe and Arthur Rock Immigrant Defense Fellow and Supervising Attorney in the NYU School of Law Immigrant Rights Clinic. But basically what that means is that I teach, or I co-teach, in the Immigrant Rights Clinic at NYU Law School. And that entails working with law students who are second and third year law students to represent individuals who are defending against deportation proceedings, either in immigration court or at the federal court level or at the agency level. And then also collaborating with local and national campaigns for immigrant rights to advance immigrant rights across the country. And so our work is really, really diverse. A lot of the work that we do in the immigrant rights space is in an attempt to advance racial and economic justice. And I think, as Damian mentioned, a critical component of that is language access. Obviously, in order to advocate for oneself, the ability to have quality interpretation and translation services is critical. And that, as Damian mentioned, is critical both in interfacing with the community, with legal counsel, and with the courts and immigration agencies. And so what the Refugee Translation Project offers is really, really important. And I'm so excited that all of you are supporting, because it's really difficult, particularly in languages, in the vast languages that people speak, to get quality translation services so that folks can advocate for themselves and seek the immigration relief that they desperately need. And As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, the past 4 years have been really, really difficult in the immigrant rights space, from the Muslim ban, which kind of started right in 2017, to the reduction in refugee admissions, as Damian mentioned, to the lowest levels it's been in decades, to the decision to not allow asylum seekers to obtain work authorization until their applications have been pending for 365 days. It used to be that people could get work authorization with a pending application for 180 days. There is an assault on people's ability to sustain themselves economically, obviously. And then we just saw last week really, really draconian changes to asylum law that will go into effect 9 days before the Biden administration, which limit qualifying persecution um, arguments, raise the standard of proof for credible fear adjudications, allow asylum officers to consider internal relocation and mandatory bar to asylum, expand the definition of what are frivolous asylum claims, and channel people into an asylum and withholding only process that really infringes on people's access to due process. And those are things that are happening in this transitionary period, where we know that a new president is coming into office, but the current administration continues to change immigration law, and particularly asylum and refugee law, to really limit people's access to critical relief, and to folks who are fleeing persecution and torture from in their home countries. So we're hopeful that 2021 can bring about a new new light into the immigration space, of course, and that obviously, hopefully, a vaccine will enable the immigration courts to reopen and people to continue the process that they've engaged in seeking that critical relief. And then that will make language access all the more important, and all of that translation critically important. I do want to flag that obviously the Biden administration can't do everything. Some of the rules and regulations that are going into effect have to go through really lengthy processes. And so he won't be able to change things overnight, and nor will his administration. But I do think that in the upcoming months, we will see some movement in a direction where more people will have access to immigration relief, and language access will be critically important. And so I'm sure that Hammadi will talk more about that in better and more articulate ways than I will. So I will stop there and let you transition.
Thank you very much, Jessica. It was very informative. Next, we have Hammadi Khelifi, who's going to talk about what we can possibly expect in 2021. Hammadi is also on our advisory board. Hammadi is a program manager at the World Federalist Movement, and Hammadi is about to take the New York State Bar in February to become a human rights attorney. So very excited to have another attorney on our side. And I'll hand it over to Hammadi.
Thank you so much, Damian. Thank you, Jessica, also for your intervention. I mean, I learned a lot from you. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, participating in this event on a Sunday. I appreciate your commitment to that. I'm Hammadi Khelifi. I'm, as Damian mentioned, the programs manager at the World Federalist Movement, the Institute for Global Policy. We work essentially on atrocity prevention, international justice, and international law. We are incorporating two coalitions, the International Coalition for the Responsibility to Protect, that I work on with more focus, and also the International Coalition for the International Criminal Court, that is essentially networking with a lot of civil society organizations around the world for a stronger international criminal court and a stronger Rome Statute system. I'm also very honored to be as advisor member of the board of Refugee Translation Project. The biggest challenge for any asylum seeker is to get access to legal representation. I think only like 10 to 15% of asylum seekers have like good legal representation, and also access to good quality like translation of their documents, because you will need a lot of evidence showing your credible fear and the prosecution happening, like police reports, medical reports, if you can get access to it, even like public statements, or like any other like statements supporting affidavits supporting your case, and all of that needs translation. And this service, especially in the US, is very expensive. So having an organization like Refugee Translation Project I think is very, very important if for refugees and for asylum seekers. I have some slides that I want to share with you. It's like a short, small presentation that I wanted to share with you about the situation in 2021. So, like, I'm wondering about like maybe a lot of people are actually wondering about the plan of the next administration, of the Biden administration, that is going to come to the office with probably, I think, the worst legacy of immigration policy, or like of a lot of damages that happened to the whole immigration system in the United States, a system that is already broken, with like over 1.2 million cases backlog in immigration courts, over hundreds of thousands of like petitions or like applications submitted to the USCIS that like supervises the, or like that is has a first jurisdiction over like asylum cases. And people, I have seen asylum seekers waiting for years for an interview. Some asylum seekers from countries with very high national security suspicions, like Syria. So some of applicants waited for 5 to 6, 7 years without an interview. Their applications are pending. So the whole system is like kind of broken, needs substantial reform. Prior to the election, the Democratic Party and the Biden campaign set like kind of a bold agenda for immigration reform, like which are quite sweeping. Like many of Biden ideas can only be enacted with the cooperation of Congress. Actually, like I think the the president-elect can change a lot of things, like by reversing Trump's administration decisions by executive orders, like what Trump was doing. However, the cooperation of Congress and having the Senate and the House, they're supporting Biden's bills, would be really important if we want to talk about real substantial reforms to the whole situation, and making the life of asylees, asylum seekers, refugees better. Because there's something that a lot of people maybe don't think about. I understand that, but it's happening. It's that asylees, for example, after being granted asylum, or refugees still struggle a lot after that during their immigration journey. They apply for a travel document. They want to visit family in a third safe country. They might wait for 2-3 years. When they apply for a green card, the waiting time now is up to 3 years. And that the waiting time is actually very the impact on even their mental health or their daily life is really there, is like heavy. So I want to also go back and talk about the agenda of the Biden administration, and like in general around asylum and refugees. So what should we expect starting from 2021? I think one of the first decisions would not be very connected to refugees and asylum seekers. It would be more on the like more of like hot topics like DACA. people who are like holding the DACA status. Biden said that he will try to like sign a new like executive order to make the DACA like process easier, and also like to work with Congress to pass a new bill or like a new law that will create a path for citizenship for the DACA holders, who are a lot of young people usually who immigrated to the US since they were kids and they don't even know another country. And the DACA is protecting them actually from deportation. And now with the recent federal court decision, it was like a great victory to open up applications again for people to apply for DACA. But the overview of the agenda on refugees, asylums, and immigrants in this country of Biden administration was very, not perfectionist, but very optimistic. It was focusing on stop working on the border wall and the Muslim ban, protect dreamers, DACA holders, and parents of U.S. citizen children, and the public charge rule, which is a rule that would deny your green card application if your financial situation does not meet like certain hard requirements. Also provide a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, reduce immigration backlogs in immigration courts and also in the USCIS, make it easier for spouses and children of green card holders to come to the United States, and the 3 10 years bar, and expand protections for victims of human trafficking and sex trafficking, provide stronger workplace protections for non-citizens, also consider expanding the TPS status, which is the temporary protection status, or it's called temporary protected status for people from war-torn countries. It's not a grant of asylum, it's like a temporary status that protects you from being deported to a country where there is an ongoing conflict. It's a long agenda. It's also talking about and the use of for-profit detention centers that are benefiting from having a lot of immigrants being detained because they make money out of it, and also increase the number of refugees admitted into the country. And that was one of the decisions that Biden talked about publicly with like media a lot, like increasing the number of refugees admitted into the country per year. We were talking about 15,000 for 2021, but as like a decision of Trump administration, which is maybe the lowest number in the US history. That was the leader of accepting or admitting refugees in the country since like a lot of years. And under all the administrations, like even under Republican administrations, there were numbers like 90,000 and 80,000 of admitted refugees per year. Refugees are usually people who seek protection or admission in the United States, but are actually overseas. They're being displaced because of war, or they're fleeing prosecution, but they're not yet in the US. So for example, the Obama administration tried to raise the number to 110,000 refugees admitted in the US per year. And the upcoming Biden administration is more motivated to even like raise the number of admitted refugees per year. But as I said, that the legacy of the Trump administration will be huge, because even like the organizations and the agencies that assist refugees when they come here have suffered from huge cuts. There has been 85% cut of funding for these organizations that support and welcome refugees when they come. And that is like a testimony of David Miliband, the president of International Rescue Committee. It's one of like 9 big organizations that support the federal government in welcoming refugees. So that will be a big challenge to like provide funding for this federal agencies and these organizations, again, to support them to welcome refugees. And also we have to remember that the there are more than 120,000 refugees are in the pipeline, like still passing rigorous security and medical checks, waiting in line, and they wait sometimes for years, as I mentioned. I want to hear mention, for example, the example of Iraqis who worked with the US military. There were, for example, 4,000 slots for Iraqis, and only 123 persons were resettled. That's a very, like, maybe the lowest number ever of resettled refugees, like under special circumstances, like Iraqis who like worked with the US military and who have faced serious threats. Also for the asylum, which means like seeking protection or like applying for asylum while you are in the US, or especially you're on the border, that's also the Biden agenda is focusing not a lot on people who are seeking asylum or are in the US, but it's focusing more on the US-Mexico border. And I understand that because the situation there is terrible, it's chaotic. So the Biden administration is trying to navigate like this political minefield. But so I think that also in terms of changing the asylum law, I think Biden's administration only substantive proposal is to reverse Trump era restrictions on asylum for victims of domestic violence, or like all these new regulations and these new laws that have been entering into effect recently. So one of the first probably tactics the Biden administration will use if the Congress is not supporting these changes is to reverse like Trump administration decisions, because they have harmed the asylum system a lot. And as Jessica mentioned, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fast. It will take a long time to change, because a lot of these procedures has already damaged the system, and it will need a lot of time to go into effect, to be reversed. A lot of laws will need the support of Congress. And here my last point is like is about how realistic are these plans. Like the agenda is amazing, like really providing relief to maybe all immigrants, but to be realistic, a lot of even like Democrats between themselves, they wouldn't agree on all the points. A lot of political challenges might be there, but I think that at least this situation would be better with some maybe people having more access to protection, more refugees admitted per year. That I think that this is very important. And also even reversing like the Trump administration like amendments and changes would like help asylum seekers and refugees a lot, because as an asylum applicant, making you wait for a whole year for work permit will really ruin your life economically if you want to seek to like work legally and respect the law and everything. And if the Trump administration was wondering about asylum seekers like working and or undocumented people working without work permit, they are not allowing them to access like or to have a work permit. And even the rule that stipulates that when you apply for a work permit, you should not wait for more than 30 days. We have seen a lot of examples of applicants waiting for months for the renewal of a work permit. I think that last point is the biggest agency taken in charge of asylum applications should really, and refugee resettlements should really be fundamentally like reformed and should really have federal funding. The United States, the USCIS agency, which takes like is like governing all of the asylum like process applications, and also the but if you're denied, they refer to immigration court, but also like refugees resettlement as well. They interview refugees overseas, and they interview asylum seekers in the US. The USCIS went through a huge financial crisis recently, and the Trump administration did not care a lot about providing funding for this agency. And I think one of the first important steps that the Biden administration should take is provide federal funding for USCIS, because in a crazy way, this agency is relying on the petition fees to fund itself. It does not have access to federal funding. And I think that is a very important point. Biden himself mentioned that they will provide funding to the USCIS like as one of the first steps to fix the asylum system. And I hope that this will reduce at least the backlog, the waiting times, will allow people to access more to immigration relief, and will probably change the situation. So I think this is maybe all the points that I wanted to share with you. We might need a lot of time to discuss all the points, all the agenda. What do we expect? What might go through and what might not happen? But I'm open to any questions or insights that you want to share about this, because I think the challenge of the Biden administration will be really big to change things or to make them better. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Hammadi. That was great, very informative. So now, we've heard from both of our advisory board members. I was wondering, I would like to open it up now to questions that any of you might have for either Jessica or Hammadi. So if no one has any questions, I can maybe ask a few. Yeah, so Hammadi, when do you think we're going to start to see some improvements? I mean, we're going to start to see some, starting in like February, just a little bit by this lifting of the refugee ceiling. I mean, a lot of the Biden administration's ambitious plan is going to take a lot more time, but in the short term, what do you think we will expect?
I think I don't think things might be very clear to us, to be honest. But I think, for example, one Biden campaign mentioned that on day one, or like on the first 100 days, I'm not sure, but I think it's also day one, Biden administration will rejoin the Paris Convention on Climate Change, and also end the Muslim ban. These are like the two main decisions that Biden administration will take on day one of Biden's presidency. So I think ending Muslim ban would be one of the first decisions that will be taken, which is really revealing, because thousands of families have been denied really seeing their families abroad in other Muslim countries, just because of this ban, because of fear of not being admitted again into the country. And I think that also some of the changes that might happen through the time is probably the focus on the border. I do not assume, or I do not think personally, that Biden administration will focus a lot on the backlog that is ongoing in the immigration courts, because it's actually there, and the media is focusing more on all the human rights violations that are happening at the border. So more of focus will be there. I think maybe the USCIS will have again this offices that field offices like in the past, where they can interview people on the border when they're there. They do the credible fear test and the asylum interviews there, on the border, like Mexico-US border. I think we might see that as well. But I think that reversing all of Trump administration decisions might really take a while or not happen immediately, not even in the first year, because a lot of decisions really need time to change. And also, if there are maybe new laws or draft bills that will need to be passed, we will need the support of the Congress to pass, really, if we're talking about serious immigration system reform. That would not be easy. And let's also remember that Biden has been the vice president in the past, and there is kind of experience dealing with immigration or refugees and asylum seekers in the US before. In Biden campaign website, I saw that they said that they will stop the massive deportation that Trump administration started, and they will focus only on people with criminal convictions or people who are dangerous to the national security. And I think that was it looks like the policy of Obama administration that deported a lot of people. Also, we should also mention that. But the focus was, we're not going to deport families, or not going to deport people who are really just working or not dangerous, but we're just going to deport people with criminal convictions or might like be a danger to like the national security of our country. I don't know to what extent or what do they mean exactly by that, but I think that, for example, we might see less massive deportations of families because that was terrible under Trump administrations. And there are a lot of people from Salvador, for example, who were deported, and they were actually were actually killed when they were after they were deported. So the harm or the actually happened when the Trump administration deported them. So I think this is not perfect, but at least we will see less hostility towards like undocumented people who are like getting massively deported by ICE, or like getting deportation decisions enforced really fast. And I hope like some of the Trump administration decisions that were like became laws by power of agency, like by administration, like power of like enacting laws or regulations, will be reversed by the same system. It maybe like this, I hope that this new fundamental like changes to asylum law will be reversed because they are terrible. I don't think making people wait for a whole year to get a work permit is fair, is even human. And I also don't think that internal relocation, like or like giving more discretionary power to asylum officers to deny cases without justification, that would affect a lot of asylum cases outcomes, and it would really expose a lot of people to danger.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. So we have a question from Alex. There was she says there was a lot of really interesting and hopeful thoughts on how things are changing on a federal level. Are there any issues to face or changes on the horizon on a state or city level in New York City? And either Hammadi or Jessica can field this question.
Sure. Yeah. So there are lots of ways to plug in at the city or state level to engage with immigration, or to engage with city and state level practices that really affect immigration. So, for example, cities and states contract with immigration and customs enforcement for detention centers and detention beds in local jails and prisons. And those are things that cities and states opt to do, sometimes because for myriad justifications, sometimes because they are financial boons for the city or state, or for whatever reason. And cities, local residents are getting involved in those issues across the country, because those detention centers are like in our backyards, and they are and the conditions of detention, which people who are seeking all kinds of immigration relief are subjected to, are really inhumane. And so that's one issue that people at the local level can really get involved in. Many, if we're talking exclusively about asylum, many people who come to this country seeking asylum and fearing persecution in their home countries are detained upon arrival, and the conditions of detention are awful. They're awful for folks in detention because of the criminal legal process as well, and they are awful for folks who are fearing persecution abroad. And so those are things that's one issue that to me is a clear one for folks to get involved in, especially in the New York area. Many New Yorkers are detained right across the water in New Jersey, in Hudson County, in Bergen County. And they're detained for very long periods of time, and often with not potable water, with rancid food, and right now in conditions where COVID, in conditions of confinement where COVID is likely and currently spreading.
Thank you, Jessica.
And I would just say one thing. I'm hopeful that I can't speak about like what the administration will do. I'm not like politically high enough to know where folks are going in terms of immediate policies. But I am hopeful that even though Biden was the vice president under Obama, and uh, kind of understood the praxis that existed under the Obama administration, that this administration will not go back to the language of quote unquote felons, not families, because as we know, people who have felony convictions have families. And so that dichotomy is actually a false one. And the immigration policies, as Hammadi mentioned, our immigration system is very broken, and it not only is really a problem for folks who haven't had contacts with the criminal legal system, but it is really an issue for all people who are seeking either safety from persecution or dignity and the ability to live peacefully with their families. So I'm very hopeful that the Biden administration will take that to heart when it is considering what immigration policies to put forth. And I think one really big thing that Hammadi mentioned is that there are some really terrible, forgive my like obvious opinion on these things, but some really terrible immigration decisions that came down through the Attorney General's office and the Department of Justice under the current administration that have really gutted asylum for people who are fleeing, as Hammadi mentioned, gender-based violence, domestic violence in their home countries, gang-based and international criminal organization-based persecution. Those changes to asylum law and policy were almost unilateral changes because they come directly from the Attorney General. They don't have to go through congressional vetting or any kind of rulemaking, and they completely reversed asylum and refugee law such that people, and predominantly, let's be like in the gender-based violence and domestic violence context, many women who are fleeing persecution in their home countries are no longer able to access asylum or face significant bars to it. So I'm hopeful that they will also address some of those unilateral decisions taken by the Attorney General's office.
Thank you. Yeah, does anyone have...
Can I, sorry, I interrupted you, Damian. Can I just have one short intervention here? There is a book that I was reading and it's amazing. I want to suggest it to people who are here. It's a new book, like a new edition called My Trials by Judge Paul Grissendorf. This book is like showing the experience of this immigration judge who worked on immigration courts for years. And he's having a whole plan suggesting like a lot of reform for the immigration system. It might be like very, it's like in a perfect world, it might happen, but I think that, for example, if you really want to know more, like have more ideas about how judges who have been through like this whole broken immigration system, and they suggested a lot of, honestly, like very interesting reform like plans. You can read that book. I can maybe put it on the chat section, and it's very interesting, honestly. And one of, for example, of the recommendations that I never thought about was legalizing all people from like Mexico nationals in the U.S. Is like historically Mexico is very close to the United States geographically. A lot of people from Mexico are the ones who are being detained, or like, for example, legalizing every national from Mexico would reduce the backlog to 50%, and that's huge. A lot of other suggestions were, for example, trying to have like to not send all the cases to immigration court, but like try to have another have separate like judicial bodies to look into the asylum cases, and increase the number of judges. I think that this book, for example, reflects really a very good agenda if like it might be maybe in the future implemented. We never know, but I just wanted to recommend that book for people who are here.
Thank you. Yeah, put on the chat, that would be great. Anyone have any other questions? Don't be shy.
Hi, I was trying to type it, but I'm too slow. So I'm just gonna go. This is Courtney. I was just gonna ask, we hear a lot about the Middle East, the ban on the Middle East and the camps at the border. Are there any other groups that are going to be impacted by upcoming changes or even specifically left behind that we don't hear as much about? In the new 100 days or all the pieces we've been talking about so far this evening?
Who would like to answer that? It's a very good question. Thank you, Courtney.
I think I'm not sure if this totally answers the question, but I think there are a lot of people that we don't hear about because either well, for a myriad reasons. For example, there are a number of women from Cameroon who are asylum seekers detained in Georgia right now, who were also given forced hysterectomies and then deported, and that happened a few weeks ago. There are like lots of of different groups of people who are attempting to avail themselves of the immigration system here and the asylum process that I think because of both the brokenness of the system and the kind of unleashing of immigration and customs enforcement officers into communities have really impeded people's ability to pursue safety and dignity here in the United States. And hopefully some of that will change. That was one immediate example that came to mind.
Thank you.
I think also have remembered like one of the changes that Trump administration made, and that, like as you said, maybe people are not talking about, or like it's not brought up into like the public opinion or like media, which is that there was kind of an attempt to really narrow the because there are like 5 eligibility like kind of like groups that makes you eligible for asylum, and one of the rulemaking, I think, decisions was to reduce or like to make the being part of a social or like political movement very narrow, and make the non-government actors not. I think it will not make you eligible for asylum anymore. So, for example, if you're being prosecuted by the government, that might make you eligible for asylum. But if you're being targeted by, for example, a terrorist group, which is a non-governmental actor, this will not make you eligible for asylum anymore. And I think that is very important because a lot of people are fleeing like prosecution from non-governmental actors like big militias in, for example, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Libya. There's people are not part from the government, but they're more dangerous than the government itself, and they will really find you. They have access to like technology. They prosecute people, they harass them, and they threaten them their lives. So I think this decision also, I'm not sure if it's going to come into effect or if it was actually passed, but I think there was kind of talks about this, like this eligibility like or like specific group is going to become very narrow. I think that would be very dangerous, and that will bar a lot of people from seeking asylum, and I think that should also be reversed.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Sevgi. She writes, she works at as a paralegal in a law firm, and says, we have a lot of clients who are waiting for interview dates. Do you have any guess when the USCIS will start to give interview dates?
I have been like, I wanted to answer this question just because I've been chatting with a lot of people on like asylum seekers and asylums, and people like interested in like, or like being affected by asylum law. And the problem that honestly, you cannot predict that. Some people have their interviews scheduled after 4 to 6 months, after 8 months. Some people waited for 2 to 3 years. Some people waited a year. It is very different. Like, and even the time frame is like very different. Like you might wait 3 to 4 months to 6 months, as you can wait to like really up like a year or 4 years for just an interview. It depends on, I think it's very random. And also the problem that the Trump administration changed the way interviews are scheduled. So they were being scheduled like regularly under Obama administration. So people wait like up to a year. And then I think the Trump administration did something that it made new applicants being educated first, the applications, and then they would like randomly select an old application and schedule an interview for it. So I think that it really depends. I have seen totally different waiting times for interviews. Some people waited years, some people waited months. So it is unfortunately very random. And I think one of the first changes that the Biden administration should work on is really putting more money, more funds to the USCIS so they can handle the number of cases, work on the backlog, hire more officers, and have really a stronger system to like schedule more interviews for people. And I think it's also, there are delays recently also due to COVID. It's not just the system itself, but COVID really made it worse. So hopefully after like there is a vaccine, this crisis will like we'll move on. Maybe I think that waiting times will maybe decrease a little bit, but what I wanted to be realistic, what I would say, it is very random, and the waiting times are very different from a case to another, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember this too when from my end dealing with clients and their wait times. Like when the Trump administration first came to office, the wait times were just incredibly long. It was, I don't know if it was from like even before, I think they even had all their agenda and policy in place. I think just the chaos of the transition really disrupted that system. Because then like a few years into the Trump administration, I remember some clients getting an interview date within a few months. So it was very up and down, and I'm not sure the exact causes or reasons, and perhaps maybe is from depending on what country you're from also. It may impact your court date. I'm not sure. Well, thank you for the question. Well, let's talk about how just to wrap it up here, how the Refugee Translation Project is trying to, prepare for even just the, increase due to the lifting of the ceiling and the reversal of a lot of these policies. We're not the largest organization, so even like a slight uptick is very impactful to us. And so we have to, prepare for this increase in cases. Hopefully the system will start getting moving again. So what we're doing right now towards the end of the year is, raising to try to create a fund to meet this demand that we're expecting. And, as 2021 progresses, we're preparing for, the long run here. So gradually, beefing up our capacity, the amount of languages we do, and making connections with other immigration support groups in order to, meet the demands and to alleviate this financial burden of translation. I think, you know, when you're not allowed to work while you're making, you know, when you're applying for asylum, it has a huge economic impact on your life, as Hammadi pointed out. And I think, you know, relieving that financial burden just a little bit will make a huge difference. And also in, you know, getting all the documents translated so they don't have to worry about like what document I can present to the court if I can only afford to do one. But no, let's, you know, we want to make sure that they go into their court cases, you know, fully armed with evidence. So yeah, that's what we're planning to do. We're planning also to expand our, you know, human trafficking area with human trafficking groups. Also our Spanish program to meet the needs on our on the Mexican border. So yeah, we are hoping this is like a pivotal moment for the Refugee Translation Project right now, is you know, becoming more accessible to asylum applicants and also to applicants of refugee status abroad. So yeah, we have a campaign going on, which is going to be matched dollar for dollar, and now until the end of the year and even a little bit into the new year. So tell your friends. You can repost our posts on social media, and yeah, let's do this together. Does anyone have anything else to add?
I want to add by saying that I think really helping asylum seekers and refugees would, like, helping them having their documents translated would be a huge help for them, because aside from the legal representation that is very important to help an asylum seeker win his case, like translating their documents as evidence is very important, and it's very expensive. So, and most of asylum seekers are not going through like a good stable financial situation because they're displaced. They're waiting to have a work permit to go to work, and it's a lot of really hard times. So I think helping them to translate their documents would be a huge help for them, because translation services are usually expensive, especially to some specific languages like Arabic or Urdu, or like languages that are not very available, like you don't have a lot of translators doing it. It is more expensive than usual. So I think that would be a huge help for these people. And I think the mission of Refugee Translation Project is a very noble mission by like helping, because I think two things asylum seekers always facing is gathering evidence, translating it, because I don't think that making them need to compromise some documents, like just to pick up some documents to translate it, is the right solution, because you need sometimes to translate everything. And also legal representation. These are like the most two important services for an asylum seeker, first to like have a good case and win it. And I think that by spreading the word and like sharing this on social media, you're also like helping. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who came. I know you are all supporters of the Refugee Translation Project. I really appreciate your support over the years. And yeah, we wouldn't be here without you. And yeah, do we offer volunteer opportunities? We do. If you're interested in volunteering, you can email me at info@refugeetranslation.org. Oops, I didn't write it to everyone. Yeah, we're trying to coordinate volunteers based on their skills, time available, things like that. So it's it would be a good one-on-one conversation to have. Good question, Seti. All right, well, thank you so much for participating in this. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Hammadi, for your amazing knowledge and expertise in these areas. And thank you all for supporting the Refugee Translation Project. I really appreciate it, as do the people we are serving. So yeah, everyone have a good night. Yeah, feel free to email me or the organization anytime, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions or volunteer inquiries. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.